Folks, today I am thrilled to be joined by Sam Hargrave, longtime stunt coordinator and director of the two Extraction films. Sam, first of all, congrats. I thought this new film was better than the first, and it was bigger, but it also felt more personal, which I think is a huge accomplishment in its own right. And I also love the first one. So let me just say, as I'm sure you know, that came out at the start of the pandemic. And at the time, I was so desperate for a new action film with a star that I loved. So when that came out, I made a special night of it for myself, and it was just an absolute blast. And that sticks with me to this day.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, for having me. Second, that you enjoyed the film, and that's for you to feel as a fan of the first movie that the second one is better than the first. That's a huge load off our minds, because that's the goal, right? Every sequel is trying to be bigger and better than the first, and for you to feel that we accomplished that is huge. So thank you very much for that.
So I want to start with a film that's now on its seventh, and that is Mission Impossible. I was reading Christopher McQuarrie said that the discussions for the seventh film began with him and Tom saying what they still wanted to do. Chris said, well, I want to wreck a train. And Tom said, well, I want to drive a bike off a cliff. Did any of those sort of conversations occur between you and Chris? Or if not, where does the conceptualization of the set pieces start?
Yeah, actually, some of those early conversations happened between me and Joe Russo. I remember early on, after the success of the first film and how the oner was talked about and executed. The first thing that came up about a second movie was Joe mentioned, he's like, what if we did a badass oner in a prison and Rake has to escape? And that was the first sequence, the first story idea I'd heard of it. And so that was the foundation. So very similarly, it's like, oh, what's the craziest, coolest place that Rake hasn't been that we could put him and then do a oner to get out of? And we decided on the prison. So yeah, and then when Hemsworth, got involved with the story process, for him, it was mostly about character and saying like what, similarly to thinking about, the physical things and objectives and obstacles, what are some of the emotional, obstacles we can put in Tyler Rake's way that he can navigate through that will make the journey satisfying for him and for audiences.
So I have a note on that I would love to get to in a bit if we have time, but I also want to talk about the nature of sequels. I had on a documentary about Louis Capaldi, who's a pop star that I had not heard of before. And he said in it took him his whole life to write and tour his first album. And then he's asked to turn around his next one in 1 year. How does that quote make you feel about these films?
Very similar emotional reaction, in that you do a film that has taken you a long time. It's kind of the culmination of it's your first, for me, my first film, first in this franchise. And then right after that, you're saying, all right, we need a sequel, and it's got to be bigger and better. So what do you got? Fortunately for me, I've been doing, and I imagine this musician's been doing things for long enough that you didn't put everything that you have or everything in that first album or first film. So there's a few tricks up your sleeve, but you do have to learn. You have to keep putting yourself out there and challenging yourself as a filmmaker, as an artist, to bring something new and fresh to the table.
Speaking of challenging yourself, what was the most technically difficult set piece in this film? And what's the number one thing you would like audiences to understand about that scene that you would think help increase their understanding of or appreciation of it? I asked that because there are multiple moments in this where I'm screening in a screening room where it's me and just one dude, and I'm yelling out like, how the fuck did they just do that? There's that one move where Chris is like, boop, boop, boop. Like, so I'm just curious, is there any scene that stands out in your head that you really want to explain sort of what went into bringing that to life?
The train sequence, which is part of the oner sequence, as we call it, 21-minute, 7-second sequence that starts in a prison, goes, escapes the prison with hand-to-hand combat. Then we go to a car chase through the forest, which ultimately ends up on a train where there's fighting and action. And so that train sequence we actually started with, because of the logistics and the depth of rehearsal that was required to achieve something like that. We spent months rehearsing, and then 3 weeks on location with the train, with the cast and crew, getting that systematically prepared. And that was the most difficult, because we're on a moving train. You have not only how are you going to, in a one shot or a seeming one shot where you have to find these stitch points that are smooth, you have to choreograph those moves on a moving train, but you also have to bring along the cast and crew. So because we're moving, 3 mile, our range is 3 miles because we're moving. You can't just, let's reset. You got to stop this big machine and back it up to one. It just eats into your day. So we had these two clown cars, we called them, that where we stored the remaining cast, the crew, camera gear, stunt performers, costume, makeup, all of our camera gear and grip equipment, all on this train. And we had to base our day and the configuration of this train on what direction we were looking and where we were. So if we're on top of the train looking back, well, we had to put the train in the front. We had to push the clown car. If we then, turn around, we have to build in a stitch. So in the move towards the front of the car, we have to build in an invisible cut the next day, because overnight they have to reconfigure the train at the train yard. It's not like a car and a trailer. You just unhook and back it up and move it. This takes time and a lot of people. So the logistics of making that happen were mind numbing, and the AD department did an amazing job. But the thing that if audiences would, one thing I would love for them to appreciate, the danger and difficulty of landing practically, no CG involved, a helicopter full of stunt performers on a moving train. So that's not something that you just do every day. Flying a helicopter and landing it anywhere is dangerous, because it's a large moving machine with a lot of spinning parts on a moving train. So it's like a moving target. And on the front side, we had power lines. So there was a specific space where we could land this train where it was open, right? And so we had, power lines on the front side, trees on the back side. And so there was, I think, a 29-second window that we had to get the chopper in, line it up, do this move that Fred North, the pilot, who was amazing, and probably the only guy in the world that would do that, to flare and make this really cool move and then land, get the camera in front, and I was operating camera. So run alongside of this helicopter through hurricane force downdraft winds. It's, the wind force is enough to lift the steel machine off the ground.
That's incredible.
So you have to imagine what the force applied to the ground to lift it off. So it's landing and I have to run under it with a camera and try to keep it somewhat steady. Wow, I think it's 5 or 6 stunt performers get off safely with no safety lines, because they can't, be connected, because otherwise they'd just be dangling from the chopper. So all of the safety and logistics involved in such a dangerous stunt were mind-blowing. And the fact that we were able to do that safely and no one was injured was amazing, and something I'll be proud of for the rest of my career.
All your hard work paid off, because that sequence is a showstopper. And I want to add that the level of difficulty is increased, because unlike the first film where you're largely following Rake, the female character whose name escapes me at this time, I apologize. She's incredible in this. She is also sort of a main component in this sequence where you're sort of bouncing back and forth between the two.
Correct. Yeah, with multiple storylines we had to follow, which makes the oneer much more difficult, because you're splitting attention, and now you have to make sure you're not away from your lead too long. You don't want to be, wait, where's Chris? Why am I not watching him? So you have to make what you're doing when you're with Nick, or with, even we followed the villains for a short amount of time and trying to use that to build tension. But you have to make sure what's on camera is informing the story, revealing something about character, or at very least mounting tension until you get back to your lead character.
I can't wait to see how fans react to Nick's expanded role in this. Her moment in like the train cockpit where she's going 2-on-1 is gnarly, man.
That's one of my favorite fights that I've ever done, actually.
Oh, yeah. Cool. I cannot wait for this film to be seen so I could talk about it to people. So last summer I interviewed the writers of Spiderhead, and they were effusive in how underrated of a dramatic performer that they think that Chris is. I actually can't really believe that he's still so underrated, considering the fact that I believe he's the emotional core of the Infinity Endgame saga, which are 2 of the biggest films ever made. And I find his dramatic journey is the heartbeat of that. How 100%. Do you leverage Chris's dramatic talents in this film?
I would agree with the writers of Spiderhead that I don't know. Well, disagree that he's underrated. I would agree that underutilized, if you will. Like, to give him roles. I think they said that pretty much, yeah. Okay, well then we're in agreement fully. He's not just an amazingly fit body and a beautiful face. He has a creative intuition that is, I think, unsurpassed in the film world, and his collaborative capabilities and willingness is, to me, bar none. So you put someone like that into a dramatic role, he's going to put 110% into it, and he has the chops. Like you said, Infinity War, like that scene with him and Rocket in the cockpit was one of the brings tears to your eyes, and it's the emotional core of the journey of those characters. And so for Tyler Rake, one of the things that I wanted to really lock in on and make sure that he and I were in agreement on was the emotional journey of this character, because I know he can go in there and kick and punch and elbow his way to stardom, but that extra level of the audience caring about the kicks, punches, and elbows, that then makes the difference, I think, between a decent movie and a good movie.
Sam, let me just say, I think you guys nailed that, because one note that I have here is something that worked particularly well for me in this film is the further humanization of Tyler, particularly towards the end where the son is introduced in the first film. So this is not a spoiler, where he finds out what his son thought of him. That really, really worked for me. And as you said, I think that goes a long way in making the action matter.
Great. Yeah, that was our paramount goal in this film was, if we didn't, yes, we wanted to make the action bigger and better. Yes, we wanted to entertain people, but at the core of our process was, let's make sure that we reveal more about Tyler Rake and make him even more relatable than he was in the first movie. And I think, Chris in his performance really does that.
Now, being as spoiler free as I can, the film, like all successful films do, teases the potential for a third. What needs to happen in order for that film to become a reality?
We're kind of waiting for to see how the second movie is received. We had no idea the first movie would be so well received.
I think you're going to be all right, bro. I'm telling you.
Well, if it does, fingers crossed, people enjoy the second one. There already is, and this is without spoiling anything, because I think Joe has said it in the in pop culture on lots of different sites. But there is a story for a third movie in the works. What it is exactly, I can't say right now. But I believe there is another adventure in the wind for Tyler Rake.
Have you spoken to Chris, though? Because I know that he was going to take a step back. Is he on board for a third film if and when it does go forward?
Yeah, when he is taking a step back to kind of just spend more time with family, because he's a family man. That's very important to him. And just to kind of enjoy the life that he's earned to this point.
His show was great, too, I must say.
Limitless, right? It's so good. So great. He's such a great presence on camera and just a really good human. But the desire to take this character as far as it can go, and the fact that he has a franchise outside of the Marvel universe, I think are two things that are very, very enticing to Chris, because it's, to be heading a franchise that has the emotional core and depth that Tyler Rake does, and still have this globetrotting action, grittiness to it. I think those are two pretty cool characteristics, and he recognizes that. So when we spoke, he has, said that he would be interested in perhaps reprising the role.
Well, and your point about the two franchises that he has, I think that this one is special because it's more like I grew up with the Stallones and the Schwarzeneggers and the Bruce Willises, where, no offense to Rake, people aren't showing up for Tyler Rake the way they are Thor. People are showing up in this movie for Chris Hemsworth. I think that's a huge difference.
Yes.
So being, again, so to that note, with sort of the action stars of my past and yours, are there any dream castings for this third film? Is there any action star that you're simply dying to work with? I got to try, Sam. I'm sorry, brother.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, I think I could say this without spoiling anything, because no one has been approached, no deals have been made. I mean, there are so many different iconic action stars that I would love to work with and see in that film that you just list them. You did list them earlier. I mean, the Schwarzeneggers, the Stallones, the Willises, the Nick Cages, like of that iconic era of like 90s and 80s and 90s action films. Any one of those characters would be amazing to see join this universe. But again, I can't say it because none of that stuff's been finalized. Right.
And then speaking of, big characters and big roles, and I will bleep this out because this is definitely a spoiler. This film contains a cameo role with I'm just curious why him and how that came to be. And again, don't worry, I will bleep this all out until the film is out.
Okay, great. Well, Bleep is an amazing actor and an amazing talent who in his own canon of film has stood out as just someone that who really brings all of his heart, soul to the characters he plays. And so he also kind of is a huge fan of Chris's, but also a good friend. Like they go way back and have worked together, and they've wanted to do things together outside of that universe. And so when we were trying to expand the universe, Chris made a phone call and said, "Hey, would you want to come play?" And he graciously said yes. And there you go.
Perks of having an A-list star as your lead, right?
Exactly.
Sam, congrats on this film, man. I genuinely mean I loved it more than the first. These have sprung up out of nowhere to become like one of my favorite action franchises out there. So I can't wait to see what you do next, whether it be Extraction 3 or something new, man.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
All right, Sam. Cheers.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.